Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Okay, so as per usual, a big thank you to everybody that watched last week's episode of the show, commented, did the social media sharing and all that kind of stuff. It is indeed appreciated, and obviously if I haven't replied to your comment, I will certainly get around to doing so as soon as I can. So anyway, this week's episode of the show, I thought you might be getting a little bit bored or tired of me going, oh look, I'm beginning this week's episode with a 21-year-old, and you know, tasting all these marvellously old whiskies which cost an arm and a leg. So I thought it's probably about time we did an affordable episode of the show. I mean, you don't need me to tell you that your average distillery bottle 10-year-old is now pushing 50 odd quid, a 12-year-old anywhere between sort of 60 and 70, and well, anything a bit older than that is, like I said, starting to cost you an arm and a leg. So how have the independents gone about sort of addressing this issue? Certainly they've not dropped their prices. I mean, your average 10-year-old cask strength whisky is now coming in at anywhere between 60 and 80 pounds, and well, yeah, anything with a modicum of age is going to cost you even more than an arm and a leg. But what a number of them have decided to do over time is create what is known as regional malts, or a regional malt range, and showcasing you know, either a single malt or a vatted malt from, say, Speyside, Highland, Islay, etc, etc. And now, yes, I know a number of these bottlings don't carry an age statement, and obviously that allows the independent bottler a little bit of flexibility with vatting malts together for the particular brand, for want of a better word. Sometimes if they can't get hold of a particular cask or a particular age statement malt that they used last time, they'll substitute for something else, and by not obviously telling you where the individual components come from, it allows them that kind of flexibility, which, you know, not got an issue. And if they give it batch numbers, well, you know, nobody's going to really care that maybe batch 2 tasted a little bit different to batch 1, and so on and so forth. And so, yeah, pretty much most independent bottling companies these days, or certainly the ones that I know of and work with, will have this kind of regional malt range. I mean, when you think about it, vatted malts is nothing new. They've been around for donkey's years. I think what is new is this whole idea of kind of showcasing the style of a particular sort of region, whether, like I said, whether it's Speyside or Islay or what have you, and you know, giving it its own kind of brand, for want of a better word. I hate that kind of word, but you kind of get what I mean. You know, it's not kind of like seen as an add-on, or just sort of like, you know, something that they've thrown together. They, you know, most independents have created a sort of a range with its own identity and all that kind of stuff. So basically, I've got half a dozen here in front of me, and we shall see whether the juice in the bottle is pretty damn good and whether they're worth it. And like I said, the average cost or retail price of these bottlings is about, you know, in the 30s. The most expensive is the cask strength 12-year-old Scallywag, which is or did retail for £57.95, but all the rest are in and around the 30 quid mark, which, you know, is a good price. So let's see if they're, you know, if they're compromised, should we say, to get to that price point. So yeah, let's take a look at today's lineup. So we're going to kick off today with a bottling called Riverflow. This is from Morrison and Mackay's regional malts range. This is their Speyside bottling. They also do an Islay called Big Strand, and one from Orkney, which whose name has just eluded me, but they do one from Orkney. And so this is all from one single distillery. It's all from a Croysk. It's a vatting of spirit aged in both first fill bourbon and refill bourbon. The first fill bourbon component is between 6 and 8 years old, and the refill bourbon component is about 9, or certainly was in this bottling, which dates back to the first release, which was in 2017. I don't know whether subsequent releases have changed at all. I would imagine there's been a little fluctuation in the age. I'm guessing at the end of the day it all comes down to what casks of Croix they have available to make this particular bottling with. But anyway, it retails, or we retail it I should say, so yeah, it's giving the game away with regards to what I think of it, for £31.60. So pretty good price, I think. Second bottling we'll be looking at is this one. This is from AD Rattray, and this is called Cask Speyside. Now, as you know, they do a Cask Islay, they also do a Cask Orkney, and they do just recently released a very special edition of the Cask Islay, which I did think about including in today's episode of the show, but it's so new that I couldn't find a picture of the bottle. I don't know what the ABV of it is anyway. So we're going to go with this, the Cask Speyside. It, as you can see, is a 10-year-old, bottled at 46%, all aged in American oak, and would you believe it, Macallan, which should be interesting because, like I said, you don't see Macallan very often wholly in American oak. And although they haven't told me this is Macallan, they've kind of, should we say, intimated it's Macallan, and having tasted it, I'm fairly certain it is indeed Macallan. So this retails at $35.95, and so again, really good value. I mean, you know, how many 10-year-olds are you going to get for that kind of money? And certainly, I don't know what, I don't even know if the Macallan do a 10 at the moment. I think it's a 12, I think, and I think it's probably about 60 quid. So anyway, we shall see what that one is like. The next bottling we're looking at is batch 1 of the cask strength Scallywag, which is, I've actually got the proper glass for it, you know, that's quite impressive. So this is a selection of Speyside malts matured in ex-Oloroso and ex-Pedro Ximenez, and so as you can see from the colour, yep, that's a fair amount of sherry in there. It's bottled at 53.6, and this is the most expensive bottling in today's show, retailing at £57.95. The next bottling we'll be looking at is another Douglas Laing bottling. This is their limited edition cask strength Rock Oyster bottling. Now, for the, I imagine quite a few of you know of the Rock Oyster, which I think has now changed its name to Rock Island. Don't know why. I'm supposing it's probably because, again, the whole regional malts concept, that it's more about the islands, because the malt comes from Orkney, Arran, Jura and Islay. Now, of course, the 46% bottling has been around for quite some time, and I've tasted it on several occasions, and the quality hinges on how much Jura they've actually used in the vatting, shall we say. Too much Jura and it's a bit rough and ready. Smaller amounts obviously allows the Arran to come through, and when that is the case, it is a lovely vatting. So this is bottled at 57.4%. This is batch number 1, and is retailing for £46.95. So yeah, again, not a bad price. The penultimate bottling we're looking at is this one. This sample actually comes from the 2018 World Whiskey Awards, in actual fact, and it is Duncan Taylor's The Big Smoke. Now, actually, I've probably said I no longer have any direct dealings with Duncan Taylor, but you know, back, oh God, how long ago now? 10, 12 years ago, when I was dealing with them. I think they were one of the first independent bottling companies to do this kind of bottling, and they released a bottling called Old Reekie, which I think was originally Colila, I could be wrong, then may well have become a vatted malt like this one is. This is obviously being called the Big Smoke. It's, you can probably guess where it's going to come from. It is indeed a vatted Islay, so it'll be interesting to see what that's like. It retails at $34.95. Now, yeah, obviously back in the day when I used to deal with Duncan Taylor. We used to stock Old Reekie. It was again a really good price for what was a really good bottling. So let's hope the Big Smoke is equally as good. And finally, this one, nice big sample that Hunter Laing kindly sent me. This is the Scarabus bottling. Now, the reason I've included it, well, because it is a regional malt, but it is a single malt from an unspecified Islay distillery, and I believe in an earlier episode of the show somebody made a comment about thinking that this was all from Lagavulin. I think it was when I did the Lagavulin episode of the show. And I really tried my best to find out from Hunter Laing exactly where it came from, but they were not going to tell me at all. So I'm just going to have to sort of see if I can figure that one out. But anyway, so it is an unspecified Islay single malt, bottled at 56%, and I've got it on the shelf at, again, £31.66. So again, you know, really good value. And obviously, because I've got it on my shelf, I think I'm giving the game away as to how good it actually is. But anyway, we shall see when we get there. So, right, that's this week's episode of the show. Let's kick off with a bit of Riverflow then. Right, okay, so let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? The first fill American oak is quite obvious. It's got a lot of toffee, it's quite creamy, but there's some lovely barley notes, a touch of citrus, a little youthful digestive biscuit note, but it's got that kind of classic or Croix fresh, crisp character, and it's really well balanced at the end of the day. Not too much oak, but enough. I mean, certainly you notice that sort of straight off the bat, but you know, give it a bit of air, give it a bit of time, it kind of settles down, and it's not the most overly complex of whiskies on the planet, but I think for 30 quid, you know, it's got a really nice nose. See what it pants like. Opens up with, again, like the nose, lots of creamy toffee. In comes the citrus. There's a touch of honey on the mid palate. It's a medium length. The sort of the crisper sort of citric notes kind of come back on the finish, and the oak, I wouldn't say kind of peters out, but it kind of starts off with more of the American oak with the first fill character, and it kind of, as that sort of slips away, the citrus and the slight honey and the barley kind of come through. So it's got, I think, really quite pleasant progression. And like I said, for 30 odd quid, you know, you would not be disappointed with that at all. And I think that is really quite pleasant. You see my red and okay, so let's move on to the cask Speyside. So, see what the nose gives us on this end. Okay, so plus points. Barleyed, fresh, crisp, apple, touch of oak, a little bit of vanilla fudge possibly. Minus points, it's bourbon aged Macallan. It's got that edginess, it's got that slight industrial barley character. So you can't say that it doesn't have plenty of distillery character, because it has got it by the absolute bucketful. And if you've never had a Macallan shorn of sherry, give this one a try, because it is just, it's the distillery character absolutely spot on. The industrial note to me just jars a little bit, but that's the distillery character. That is why Macallan uses so much sherry. It's no different to sort of Dalmore or Glenfarclas or Glengoyne, you know, all these other distilleries that produce a slightly industrial style spirit. But from a curiosity point of view, it is, you know, it's really quite enjoyable, you know, and you're not shelling out a huge amount of money for it either. 36 quid, you know, the quality is absolutely spot on. See what that's like. Oilier, fuller. Again, it's got that slight industrial barley character. There's a bit of fudgy oak, some citrus, some apple, a little bit of spice coming through on the finish. Yeah, again, it's American Oak Aged Macallan. Don't expect to be sort of blown away by it, but like I said, it's an interesting view of the distillery, and it showcases exactly the character of the distillery. And to be fair, I've tasted worse examples that have been in American Oak that have been a hell of a lot more industrial and hard, and you know, than this particular bottling. And the American Oak softens it slightly. That sort of fudginess does to a certain extent offset some of the industrial character of the bottling. For me, yeah, I'm kind of a bit ambivalent about it. Like I said, I think if you want to see the character of the distillery without any sherry, then it's certainly worth trying. And like I said, you're not going to sort of, you know, spend an arm and a leg on finding that out. So yeah, not too bad. Okay, so let's move on to the Scallywag. Now, I don't know, again, the thing is with these kind of bottlings, the components will change over time, as we well know. Now, the 13-year-old that was released, I think, Christmas last year, something like that, I think. I was told was comprised of Mortlach, no surprise, Macallan, no surprise, Glenrothes, no surprise, and apparently Inchgour. Now, I have come across quite a lot of sherried Inchgour. In actual fact, I was tasting one last night, a new release of Old Particular, I think it was, and I think it was Old Particular, I can't remember now. It was an Inchgour anyway. It was a sherried Inchgour, and it was sort of like, well, it was a sherried Inchgour, you know. Anyway, so coming back to the 13-year-old, it was those were the major components, and then there was a few others, one or two others, which they didn't tell me about, which I've got no idea why. Why would, you know, if you're quite happy to tell me about some of them, why not all of them? But anyway, that is by the by at the end of the day. Let's see what the nose is like. Oh, that's really herbal, Oloroso, toffee. There's a bit of barley, I will give that through. There was a bit of barley character coming through. There's a little bit of that kind of Speyside-y kind of tart gooseberry, which is kind of, I suppose, to a certain extent balancing the sort of sweet dried cherry fruit. There's a bit of beeswax. There's a bit of maturity happening here. I mean, it's 12 years old, and there's a little bit of that kind of oxidised sort of baked apple. I mean, yes, it's a sherry monster. The Oloroso component is the more obvious. I'm getting less of the PX. There's a little bit of treacly wininess in the background, but you know, I suppose if you like a big sherried whiskey, and this has got a relative amount of balance, should we say, although it is, the nose is certainly skewed more in the sherry direction, which is, you know, not a surprise, but it does have a little bit more than your average sherry monster. Anyway, let's see what the nose pouts like. The palate's a lot sweeter, a lot more treacly, a lot more of the PX kind of coming through on that. The alcohol and a little bit of minerality, to a certain extent, balance it. It's got a little bit of a masked finish as the alcohol kind of cuts the sweetness short. You wouldn't know where it comes from, to be bluntly honest with you. There was an element of barley on the nose, but there's nothing like that on the palate. It is pretty much all sherry. It's very clean sherry, and like I said, there are those of you out there that enjoy a sherry malt, and from that perspective, it's very, very pleasant. I'm going to put a little drop of water with that to see what that does to it. A little bit lighter, a little bit more herbal as well. Not that it really needs to be more herbal, it's pretty herbal to start off with. Possibly a little bit more barley, a little bit of almost kind of banana-y fruit. It's a banana skin kind of fruit. I mean, it's got a nice robust character. It's not at all rough. Smooth, you know. It's got a, yeah. It's a pleasant nose. Let's see what the palate's like now. A lot sweeter now that the alcohol has been diluted, and there is still some minerality there, but it is a lot sweeter. It's still a touch on the short side, and you could argue that it's a little homogeneous, but again, the sherry is very clean, and it certainly delivers plenty of dried fruits and dried fruits and dried fruits. And yeah, to me it kind of, to me I think it's better without the water. I think it's more balanced with the higher level of alcohol. Just kind of balances up the sweetness. But overall, I mean, 60 quid, well, 57.95. Wow. Right, okay. Well, look, Barbie's put in an appearance, obviously wants a bit of rock oyster. So let's indeed move on to the rock oyster bottling. So this is the limited edition cask strength batch number 1. Let's see what the nose gives us on this, or should we say, excuse me, how much Jura is in this particular vatting. Actually, thankfully, not an awful lot in actual fact. It's got a nice sweetness. You can tell that the underpinnings of this particular bottling is the Arran. It's got a pulped, almost tequila-y kind of white fruit character. A little bit of barley, a bit of honey, a little bit of smoke. I think the Islay component in this is, no surprise, Kalila, as it is the one that seems to sort of do the rounds more often than not, shall we say. I mean, that's because it churns the stuff out, and obviously Diageo are quite happy to sort of flog it to all and sundry. But you know, that is a lovely nose. That's got a lovely richness and a depth. There's a little bit of barley, and like I said, to me it seems to be more centred on the Arran and the Kalila, and less about the Jura, thankfully, and the Highland Park. That's lovely. I really like that. I must admit, like I said, I do like the rock oyster, the normal 46% bottling. Certainly, like I said, when the Jura component is somewhat diminished. But this is really quite pleasant. Let's see what the palate's like. lovely herbal honey finish. I think the Highland Park is certainly kind of coming through on the finish. Again, it feels like it's centred around the Arran. It's got an estery, fruity character. To be fair, I'm getting virtually no dirty old Jura, shall we say, or no, dirty old Jura. That's probably a little bit hard and uncompromisingly, you know what I mean. So it's kind of nice and fruity. It's got a little bit of herbal honey, a little bit of heather. It's got and a pleasant degree of peat. It's not sort of like a huge peat monster. I mean, this is an island bottling, not an Islay bottling. So the peat is noticeable, but balanced and held within the confines of the coastal fruitiness of the malt. I'm going to put a little drop of water with it, but again, like the Scallywag, I really don't think it actually needs any water. I think the alcohol kind of just is really so well integrated. Yeah, it's noticeable, but it's not like it's kind of totally masking the finish. If anything, it's kind of brought out the Arran content, to be honest with you. It feels a little bit more coastal now, more rock pools and oysters, so they really should have kept the rock oyster name, in my personal opinion. That's a lovely nose. I really like that. I mean, and you know, and this just goes to show how good vatted malts can actually be. They are greater than the sum of their parts. You know, the combination of the Arran with a slight smoke and a little bit of herbal, heathery, honey kind of character is just absolutely delightful. I mean, if it was me personally, I wouldn't even bother with the Jura. I would just shuffle the Jura off, should we say. It's not really necessary to stick any of that in. I would just stick with Arran, Highland Park and Kalila. I mean, you know, brilliant. Let's see what it tastes like now. Ooh. Water has actually brought out the Kalila. It's a lot more tarier, a lot more peatier. The Arran has kind of slipped off a little bit, as has the Highland Park. You could argue that makes the palate a little bit sort of unbalanced, and yeah, okay, I see your point with that. But yeah, I really like that. I mean, you know, the thing is with Kalila, obviously, you know the quality is going to be good. You know what you're going to get. Well, maybe you don't always know what you're going to get with the peating level wise, but you know the quality is going to be really good with Kalila. It's got a sort of a slight greeny fruit kind of finish. You can argue, like I said, it's a little bit simpler, it's a little bit more one-dimensional now you put water with it, but like I said, I think the alcohol was so well contained, you didn't need to worry about putting any water with it. It was just really, really good. So yeah, pretty damn good. Okay, so let's move on to the big smoke. So not a cask strength bottling, so this is a bottle of 46%, and it's a vatted Islay. Really briny, crisp, edgy. Again, I would guess the bulk of this blend, or this vatting, is centred around Kalila. It certainly has a almost kind of old school Kalila kind of freshness to it. A bit of iodine, medicinal peat. Maybe there's a bit of Laphroaig in there, possibly. I certainly don't get any kind of burnt woody Ardbeg. I don't get any sort of rich malty Bamor or violets. So I mean, there could be a bit of Bamor possibly lurking there, but I would guess that the bulk of this is Kalila. Yeah, maybe it is a bit of Kalila, bit of Laphroaig, bit of Bamor possibly. Yeah, I mean, perfectly acceptable Islay. I mean, you know, if you got handed this and you love your Islas, you love repeated malts, it's pretty damn good. I mean, again, we're not talking huge gubbins of peat. You know, it's balanced. You know, it's got some fruit. It's got plenty of coastal character. I think this is really quite pleasant. So it pass like. Palate is quite pleasant. I mean, it's a bit simple. I mean, it is kind of sooty and dusty peat, a little bit of medicinal peat, plenty of fruit, nice bedrock of fruit for the peat to play on, a bit of barley. And although it's relatively straightforward, it has a pleasant depth. It's got good weight to it. Not a great deal of oak, but then how many Kalilas do you ever come across that have a great deal of oak to start off with? And yeah, it is predominantly Kalila. There may well be a little bit of Laphroaig sort of lurking there, and possibly there's a little bit more, but I think the bulk of this is pretty much Kalila. And like I said, I've got no issue with that at all. You know, I don't care where it comes from. I don't care what distillery it comes from. What bothers me is it pleasant to drink? And well, it is. That ticks that box, you know. And at $34.95, you would not be disappointed with that. If you like Islas, if you like your peated malts, you know, it ticks all the right boxes. Yeah. And finally, time for a bit of Scarabus. Interesting name, I suppose, for a vatted malt, you know, naming it after a dung beetle. Anyway, I must admit, I will say, and obviously, as we well know, packaging and all that kind of frippery is neither here nor there, but I do like the bottle, and it kind of reminds me a little bit the whole kind of labelling concept of Compass Box, and yeah, it's a magnificent looking label, shall we say. So let's hope the whiskey is up to that. Ooh, now that is a nice nose. Oily apricot, peach, barley, salt, heather, dusty peat, malt. Oh, that's a rich nose. That really is absolutely gorgeous. Don't think it's Lagavulin. I'm pretty convinced it's not Lagavulin. I think you can rule out Kalila, not fresh enough. Kilhoman, nah, definitely not Kilhoman. Too much peat for Bunnahabhain. Not enough medicinal notes for Laphroaig, and again too weighty for Laphroaig. Well, pretty much narrows it down to either Ardbeg or Bamor, really. I'm not getting the kind of burnt wood, so I'm going to discount Ardbeg, and I'm going to say this is probably Bamor. Oh, it's got that lovely juicy, orangey, marmalade-y, rich fruitiness. God, that's a damn good whiskey, that's all I can say. For 31 quid, well, 32 quid, that's blowing me away, I can tell you for a fact. That's lovely. I mean, that really is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, let's just assume that it's, say, 10-year-old, probably not quite as old as that, maybe about sort of 8 possibly. They could have bottled that as, say, 8-year-old Bamor, and they could have charged an arm and a leg for it, but no, they've decided not to do so. And it just goes to show that, sort of, like I said, and I think with all of these regional malts, the quality has been absolutely spot on, and you should not be worried about the quality of so-called vatted regional malts. You know, independent bottling companies these days are not stupid. They're not going to bottle a load of crap, basically. Well, certainly not in that kind of range, shall we say. Anyway, oh, that's lovely. Let's see what it tastes like. Ooh, peat dust on the chest. Rich, robust, heathery, dusty, sooty peat. Violets, malt. That's a big mouthful. That is an intense mouthful. That is stunningly good. Yep, and I'm going to hang my hat on the fact that I think that is Bamor. I could well be wrong, but like I said, I think the palate kind of bears that one out. It doesn't have the characteristics of the other Islay distilleries. Chewy, rich, big, deep. I mean, that doesn't need any water at all. I am going to put a little drop of water with it, just to see what happens, but that really doesn't need it. I mean, that is stunningly good. And it's 32 quid, for God's sake, you know. It's pretty much the same, actually. It's alright, a little bit less intense. There's a little bit more toppied oak kind of coming through, but again, and it possibly does emphasise a little bit of the youthfulness of the spirit. But it's got some stewed fruit. I mean, it's just a damn good nose. Kudos to Hunter Laing for this one, it has to be said. And like I said, you ought to buy this if you like peated malts. You will not be disappointed. I can tell you that for a fact. Let's see what the palate's like now. Flambéed bananas and toffee, and isn't that? Yeah, that would be a Scotch malt whiskey bottling, wouldn't it? Flambéed bananas and toffee. Toffee. I can't speak now. My mouth is watering. It's just kind of. Damn, that is good. I mean, that is really impressive. And like I said, it's 32 quid, people. You know, I mean, wow. I mean, they can bottle something of that quality and punt it out for that kind of price. I mean, yeah, I'm just stunned, speechless. Yeah, lost for words. Well, yeah, that's a first, isn't it? Damn, good. Must buy. Okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show up. Firstly, a big thank you to all the independents for today's samples. Your continued support is appreciated, and hopefully you won't be too upset with some of my comments. The Riverflow from Morrison and Mackay, yeah, absolutely no problem with that whatsoever. Great value, classic Speyside whiskey. It's got a bit of oak, it's got some character, it's got some freshness, some crispness, a bit of gooseberry, all that kind of stuff that you would expect from a sort of a Speyside malt. So yeah, it kind of certainly ticks the box of you know, a regional malt. The Speyside 10-year-old from AD Rattray, again, not a bad whiskey. I mean, it is very indicative of the style of the distillery. You know, it is what it is. It's American Oak Aged Macallan. It's showcasing what Macallan's spirit is actually really like. And if you're curious to know that, just to sort of, I suppose, broaden your whiskey knowledge, I suppose, then by all means get yourself a bottle of it. It's fascinating stuff. The Scallywag, again, you know, nothing wrong with that at all. I mean, it had plenty of sherry character, as you would expect. The sherry was very clean. There was no blemishes. You know, so if that's your kind of cup of tea, then yeah, it's a good whiskey. The Rock Oyster. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. Like I said, I think the most successful bottlings are the ones that don't have an awful lot of Jura in them, and certainly that one, to me, certainly didn't seem to have an awful lot of Jura. There was obviously some in there, but certainly the more dominant pairing was Aaron and Kalila. So again, really very good. The Duncan Taylor Big Smoke, again, really good value for money. I mean, it certainly does what it says on the tin. Like I said, predominantly based around Kalila, I would imagine. That's what it seemed to me. And again, a really good batting. So, you know, no problem with that whatsoever. Star of the show, I think, was the Scarabus. I mean, you know, 32 quid for this baby. Absolute steal. I mean, you know, if you like the rich Islas, the rich peated malts, then that is certainly going to appeal to you, and it certainly appealed to me, it has to be said. So there you go. That's this week's episode of the show in the bag. I hope you've enjoyed it. Like I said, you know, these are all what I would consider to be affordable whiskies, and yeah. All I have to say is good afternoon and good dramming.